Hello there everyone and welcome back to a brand new video. The other day I asked you on my Discord server and Twitter for some Star Wars gaming related questions for a Q&A. So today I will be answering those questions as well as going over my hopes for Star Wars Celebration in just over 2 weeks time. I'll start off with the Twitter questions, then I'll move over to the Discord questions, and then like I said I'll wrap it up with my hopes for Celebration. But without wasting any more time, let's get into it. So to start with, we have a question from Sammy Boy, and that is, what are you expecting from the Hunters panel at Celebration, and what level of success do you expect for the game over the coming years? Well, from Celebration we already know that we're going to be getting an hour-long panel, which is going to contain some looks at upcoming content, so I'm hoping to see some new Hunters there and more maps and maybe some other cosmetics potentially, but I don't want to go into it with particularly high expectations either. With regards to the level of success though, I think the game could be very successful. Just from the last few months of playing it already, I have had a ton of fun, and if you then throw global release along with content on a hopefully regular basis, then I think it could do really well. Next is a question from Eugene, and that is, what are you hoping to have from the Respawn Star Wars FPS game? My absolute hope for this game is to see a Clone Wars style tactical shooter, where they have a story as a Republic Commando squad. It could potentially be Delta Squad maybe, but I don't really mind, or maybe even Bad Batch. But regardless, I want to see a tactical shooter sort of campaign set during the Clone Wars with then a small scale multiplayer, a bit like Rainbow Six Siege. Next is a question from Daily Tactics, and he says, do you believe that Battlefront 2 should have been continued being developed, or do you think the game had lived through its cycle and was okay with being let go? So the game had been out for about 2.5 years before content support was ended, so I totally understand the decision to let it go and for DICE to focus more on Battlefield. However, a lot of games these days typically get content for even longer, like Fortnite's going on to its 5th year later this year, Rainbow Six Siege has been going on for a long time, For Honor and everything else. And with all of the Star Wars TV shows coming out over the next few years, and no doubt beyond, there's so much content from them that could have been added into Battlefront 2. So whilst I understand the decision to let it go, I absolutely think Battlefront 2 should have continued being developed. Next is a question from the 66th Legion, and they ask, in an ideal world, would you have rather had Battlefront 2 support for longer or Battlefront 3 come sooner? Now this is definitely a very interesting question, but with the rapid fire pace of Star Wars TV shows coming out and with all the content they have in there, there's a lot that Battlefront 2 could have been added to. So I would have loved to have seen all of that come to Battlefront 2, and if we had a Battlefront 3 then it would have been all 3 eras once again, and we've already had that so many times. So I think ultimately it just would have been better to carry on Battlefront 2 support, add in all of this content for all these new TV shows and films as they release, and when there's a bit of a dry spell then they can just go and add content that previously released, like things from Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars Resistance and even more stuff from the Clone Wars. Now the next question is from Rogue Console, and this is the final one from Twitter, and he asks, what's your biggest expectation from Jedi 2? Following on from Jedi Fallen Order, my biggest expectation definitely has to be a more open world and non-linear level design. As much as I loved Jedi Fallen Order, there's not really a lot to do in the game besides the story, so in Jedi 2 I'm really hoping that we have much bigger maps and just more to do inside the open world, just to give us more things to do to play. The gameplay was really fun, so it was a shame not to really have an awful lot to do in Fallen Order, so as I said, that's my main hope for Jedi 2. Moving on to the Discord questions now, the first one comes from Zorkin, and he asks, what studio would you like to see the most make a Star Wars game? Now for me there are two main ones in particular. Now they're not specific development studios, but I'd love to see Ubisoft make a Rainbow Six Siege style Star Wars game. However, if Respawn's first person shooter is a tactical shooter, then I wouldn't be too worried about Ubisoft making a tactical shooter game, because hopefully Respawn would have already done it with a multiplayer. But if that doesn't get multiplayer, then I'd love to see Ubisoft take that on board. And then also I really want to see Codemasters make a Star Wars racing game that involves pod racing, starfighter racing, speeder bike racing, and maybe others as well. But either way, just a big Star Wars racing game from Codemasters, and then a small scale tactical shooter from either Respawn or Ubisoft would be great as well. The next question is from SV, and he says, any predictions on what we might get from Respawn's first person shooter? So earlier in this video I talked about my hopes of it being a Clone Wars game, but in terms of what I'm actually expecting, it's not that whatsoever. Based on the Battlefront 2 actors seemingly filming around LA at the same time, I'm fully expecting to see an Inferno Squad campaign that takes place before episode 6, so obviously prior to the Battlefront 2 campaign, that potentially has the Jabez incursion. Obviously the Jabez incursion was mentioned in Squadrons and also Battlefront 2. Shen was there from Squadrons, so it would be cool to see him in the game, as well as obviously Inferno Squad as playable, because potentially Shen crashes, which obviously causes a lot of damage to himself, and then Inferno Squad needs to go behind enemy lines to rescue him. Something like that would also be really cool other than a Clone Wars game, so I'm fully expecting that, and then hopefully we do have a small scale multiplayer as well that gets content for a year or two, or maybe even longer. Next is a question from Tom, and I also had this question from SB on Twitter as well, and that is simply just Battlefront 3 when? Honestly, I don't really think it's going to happen, and to be honest, I'm not going to go into anything expecting a Battlefront 3. I'd love nothing more than to see it, but right now I'm just going to try and focus on my attention on all of these other Star Wars games. Next is a question from Mafia, and he asks, will Jedi Fallen Order crossover with ObiWan? Now, I absolutely don't think it will, and I've seen a lot of people mention this over the last few weeks, because I've seen a lot of people want to see Cal Kestis in the ObiWan show, but thinking about it logically, Jedi Fallen Order takes place in 14 BBY, with the Kenobi show taking place in 9 BBY, so there's already a 5-year time difference then. If Jedi 2 takes place in 14 BBY or just a few years after, but still prior to the Kenobi show, then if Cal appears in Kenobi, then it's kind of a bit spoilery and also just very, very messy to deal with regards to the story. So I just don't think it's something that's worth tackling, to be honest. You know, it would obviously be cool to see Cal in live action, but it absolutely will not be happening in Kenobi. Next is a question from Yoda Epic, and he asks, what new gameplay mechanics or abilities would you like to see in Jedi 2, and what planets would I like to see? With regards to the planets, there's nothing I'm particularly expecting. I'm just really hoping to see some new worlds, and maybe we get to go and explore a different part of another world that we already know. As for gameplay mechanics and abilities, I really want to see multiple new types of lightsabers so that we can have even more fighting styles, and then I also really want to see gunplay as well. If you add gunplay, you're adding a completely new level of gameplay to this game, and I think if you're going into civilized areas in Jedi 2, which obviously may not happen, but if it does, then it would make more sense to use a gun than whipping out a lightsaber, so I definitely think gunplay would be really fun. The final question is another one from Zorkin, and he asks, which of the currently announced Star Wars games are you most excited for? Now, I'd probably say Star Wars Hunters for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's just the next big Star Wars game to be releasing. Secondly, it's a multiplayer Star Wars game that's going to be getting content for hopefully a long time, which we've obviously not had for a number of years now. And also, I'm just really excited to see where the game takes the channel. Star Wars Hunters content on the channel for over a year now has been doing really well for me, but when the game actually releases and gets in everyone's hands, I'm really excited to see if it can really take the channel from where we're at now to even beyond. So it's definitely a really exciting idea. The game is also just really fun as well, and I'm excited to see what content they add over hopefully a number of years. Anyway guys, they are all of the questions for the Q&A, so thank you to everyone who did ask them. I'll try and do another Star Wars gaming Q&A in maybe a couple months time. But with regards to my expectations for Star Wars Celebration, obviously we have that Star Wars Hunters panel, so I'm hoping to see more upcoming content for Hunters there, maybe some new Hunters and maps and stuff. But then I'm also hoping to see Jedi 2 get revealed. Obviously there's no Jedi 2 panel at Celebration, but that doesn't mean it can't be revealed. In Celebration 2019 they had the Star Wars show live where people would go on and talk about things, so I think Jedi 2 could potentially be revealed in that sort of style as well, as I don't think a panel is necessary. I did make a whole video on this just a few days ago, so feel free to check that out. But that is it from me guys, thank you all very much for watching, and may the Force be with you always.